Explained by the Billy Meier Contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more, compiled by David Chance, revised July 2, 2025.
Future Earth Humans Part 16. See also Gilgamesh. See also Hyperborea Hyperborean. See also Ecostone. See also Longskull. See also Men in Black. See also Nazca Line. See also Nocodemian. See also Patar. See also Quetzalcoatl. See also Rod. See also Starchild Skull. See also Teos Caves Metal Library. See also Tunguska Event 1908. See also UFOs Flying Saucers.
Contact Report 248.
I would gladly like to know how far you have progressed with the technology of the new transportation systems.
Everything has not yet advanced so far that our transportation systems would be useful for life forms, and thus for humans. Errors still appear that demand from us that we still perform tests with some materials that still frequently get lost during transport. They probably leave from the output location, respectively from the sending location, but they do not arrive at the destination.
Then they get lost somewhere in the dematerialized energetic state between the place of departure and the destination. They get lost, so to speak, between dimensions or in foreign dimensions, right?
That is right.
Why then do you not ask Asket's friendly folks for assistance, the ones who invented these transportation systems?
Their scientists are not more advanced in these respects, and do not possess any higher cognition about it than that of our own scientists. The systems have become a collaborative work, so all scientists of both peoples work together.
Oh, I see. I always thought that Asket's friendly folks would already have the perfect transportation system technology.
This is unfortunately not the case.
At the beginning of our contacts, Simyase gave me a variety of data relating to Venus and the Destroyer, as well as to various events on Earth and so on. Unfortunately, these data do not always coincide with reality, which is why Quetzal gave me the data again in a corrected form at a later time.
That is known to me. At that time, my daughter only spent a short amount of time on the addressed events and incidents and was not sure of the data yet. From this, it arose that she did not yet know dates and events exactly, and she confused them with one another or otherwise made faulty statements, which Quetzal then corrected, however. Note: see Contact Report 150:Q454-491. We also will not be immune to mistakes for a very long time.
Let us go to the next question, which relates to where the original Lyrans actually came from, and when they settled in the areas of Lyra and Vega.
The time of their first emigration dates back to 110 million years ago, and their place of origin was a planet named Kados in a distant galaxy known as the Nagaran Galaxy at an average distance from the SOL system of 6.3,630,000,000 light-years.
And can one see this galaxy from the Earth using appropriate instruments?
That is not possible because between their former location and ours is a dark cloud, located at a distance of 5.2,520,000,000 light-years away, which shields and absorbs the light of the galaxy.
And why did the original Lyrans leave their homeworld at that time?
Their home planet passed into the fire of the Sun system as this was changing itself into a supernova.
So then, they still set off early and emigrated to the planets of Lyra.
No, that's not right. For they first settled down in other areas of other star systems and other galaxies, just to migrate then to the areas of Lyra 26 million years ago, where they inhabited a planet that, in the meantime, has passed. So then they had to relocate once more. But these facts should not be so important for the Earth humans, that we would still have to talk about them in more detail or subsequently, especially since it concerns those planets of Lyra that are beyond this space-time plane.
But now, once again a question about the exodus of the original Lyrans. The Nigerian galaxy was abandoned 110 million years ago. And if I remember correctly, you said that they then settled in the Lyran galaxy, just to move then to the areas of Lyra and Vega about 26 million years ago. Anyhow, that is what you told me around the month of May, 1991.
That is right.
Good, but I still have a question now. The Lyra galaxy went the way of the ephemeral. Can one still perhaps see its light today?
No, that is impossible. It has pushed another galaxy, which is called NOSIR, to the place of the former Lyra galaxy, which emits its light since then, whereas the former light of the Lyran galaxy already evaporated long ago.
So then, one cannot see the galaxy anymore. Too bad.
The light from the Nosir galaxy, however, which you designate as M83, can be seen from the Earth with good devices at a distance of only 16 million light-years away.
Mathematics, as it is used by the Earth humans, does this have universal validity?
No, not in any wise, because the most diverse civilizations on other worlds have a variety of mathematical forms, which have no similarity or relationship with the terrestrial form. With us, there is, for example, no measure that represents a meter, respectively 100 centimeters, but only one that measures roughly a meter, so namely 88.6 centimeters, according to the terrestrial term of measure. With regard to mathematics, that 3 times 3 is 9. It is to be said, of course, that the result is right and is also consistent with our mathematics, but the form of our mathematics is fundamentally different to the terrestrial one. Like with the mathematical formulas, the physics formulas also differ. But once they are converted, they yield the same values because universally, the mathematical and physical laws, etc., are uniform in their basic value and final value and, therefore, are one and the same. Just with the difference that the various races, civilizations, and humanities of the various worlds throughout the vastness of the universe call other forms of mathematics and other terms, etc., their own. Consequently, they also have other methods of calculation than what are common among the Earth humans.
At earlier times, I often spoke with Sim-Ya-Se about the Earth humans and about humans of foreign worlds. Sim-Ya-Se also used certain terms for the humans of the Earth and for those of extraterrestrial origin, like also you and Quetzal and all others of your Federation. Thus, there was always talk of humanoids and of extra-humanoids, non-humanoids and inhumanoids, etc. In this respect, unfortunately, there are always misunderstandings, which should one day be removed from the world. Let me, therefore, explain these things in the manner I have understood them. Correct me, please, if I make a mistake. Humanoids are Earth humans. Only these are so called because they are just Earthborn, respectively Earth-created, in accordance with the Latin word humanus, which means something like terrestrial. The Latin term was already used by the ancient Lyrans, and to be sure, in the same way as on the Earth since time immemorial. So the term comes from the ancient Lyrans, who had also named their homeworld, in the original sense, Earth, and in consequence of this, they had also designated themselves, using a word adaptation, as Earth humans, as humanoids, after which then, in the course of time, the word humanoid was exchanged for the term human and, thus, for all human life forms throughout the whole universe, but with the difference that the differently disposed, exotic human forms, who did not exactly resemble the Lyran humans, respectively the terrestrial humans, in their inner and outer anatomies, were called extrahumanoids, respectively foreign humans. Consequently, the term humanoid was only used for the kinds of humans of a more terrestrial, respectively Lyran, nature. Nevertheless, the extrahumanoids, respectively the so-called extraterrestrials, belong to the genus Omodam, and thus are humans. It is just that they are of an exotic nature. Both terms, humanoid and extrahumanoid, trace back to the value of OMEDAM, which means something like first human or just simply human. So humanoids are always and in each case humans, no matter what exotic appearance and what anatomy they have, and no matter whether they are designated in other forms than as extrahumanoids. I often mistakenly referred to these extrahumanoids, while speaking or writing, as non-humanoids, which does not correspond to the truth, of course, because non-humanoids, respectively inhumanoids, are in reality non-human life forms that are animalistic, respectively of a fauna-like or floral-like nature, and therefore have nothing to do with human life. The term non-humanoid, respectively inhumanoid, clearly means that such a life form is non-human. In contrast, there are, for example, the peoples of Asina, extrahumanoids, who deviate in their appearance and in their anatomy very exotically from the actual humanoids, and look accordingly different as amphibian beings, respectively amphibian humans, and are arranged into other living conditions than those of humans, the kind to whom we and you belong. But these foreigners are called extrahumanoids not because of their appearance, but simply because they are of an anatomically different nature than we, who simply designate ourselves as humanoids. There are, for example, many extrahumanoids that are outwardly identical or very similar to humanoids, but they have extremely notable differences in their internal anatomies. This also testifies to the fact that they are not of terrestrial creation, but are simply beings of alien worlds, which is why they are indeed extrahumanoids. However, their anatomy also contributes to this designation because they are alien to those who are simply called humanoids, respectively humans. However, this should not mislead one to regard and judge the extrahumanoids, the foreign humans, as non-humanoids, respectively non-humans. They are still humanoids and, thus, Omodam humans, so extra-humanoids are, in every case, always human beings. It is just that they have no direct birth relationship with actual humanoids, the race of humans embodied by the Earth humans and your people. And to address the non-humanoid life forms once again, these are life forms that are not humanoid and, thus, are in no manner of a human nature, and that also have no relationship or other connections with the human species, respectively with the Omodam and humanoids, as well as extra-humanoids. And to come to speak once again of the extra-humanoids, it must be said that these are neither better nor worse humans than the humanoids of the Earth. The Earth humans, even though they often have very different and rather exotic natures, and indeed in every respect. Extra-humanoids as well as extraterrestrial humanoids are not supernatural and are not divine and, thus, are not monsters and not terrors. Rather, they are just as human as the Earth humans, the Earth humanoids, of whom, at least for the last 10,000 years, not exactly much that is praiseworthy can be said. When one considers that during this time on our planet, only 250 years of actual peace has prevailed. So in terms of this, as well as in reference to their manner and humaneness and compliance with the natural creational laws and recommendations, as you know, not very many positive things can be said. Concerning the reproduction of the extra-humanoids and other humanoids in the entire expanse of the universe, it must be said that in this respect, it does not occur any differently with all of them than it does with the Earth humanoids, so with the Earth humans. Therefore, sexual acts are necessary in order to witness descendants. What is different from the Earth humans is just the manner of the physical act of reproduction, in accordance with the exoticism of the respective life form and, accordingly, its exotic reproductive organs and reproductive practices, which are often connected with rituals that are strange to the Earth humans. Also, humanoids and extra-humanoids can mate with one another in order to witness descendants, if this is possible, due to the dissimilarity between the exotic reproductive organs and if the DNA factors, etc., are compatible and allow for procreation. It is, of course, utter nonsense that procreation and births of descendants can occur in a purely spiritual form, for a material body is always tied to a physical reproduction and birth. This is a fact that punishes all those dreamers, know-it-alls, believers in angels, and other delusional believers in lies who maintain the contrary.
Your explanation corresponds to the facts. That is what is also recorded in our chronicle with regard to the important events on the earth.
Another question. Here on Earth, for the precise defining of human beings and their family trees, etc., we use so-called surnames and first names, as even you use these. But now, how does it stand with you regarding the closer naming, respectively more exact naming, of a family tree, a family or kinship, as well as a lineage, etc.?
There is a great resemblance to the terrestrial form.
Then you also have lineages, respectively family names.
Certainly, it is just that these are formed differently, of course, and are related to other origins than what is the case with you.
Of course, that should be clear. But how do you handle it? I mean with the surname, once a marriage is established. And how do you actually join a marriage together? As an official procedure, like with us, or just as a voluntary joining together unto a marriage between two people? If I remember correctly, Quetzal once told me that the latter is the case.
I want to answer the last question for you first. While the first one seems illogical to me and is not understood by me, the process of marriage with us is that such a union is first preceded by a trial period of at least 2 years, during which the two future partners live far away and apart to test their feelings, etc. for each other. After that, they undergo various voluntary tests and clarifications regarding the capacity to marry in all areas, including, of course, the factor of descendants and the upbringing capacity of the parents and so on. These tests, which include virtually all areas of a marriage, are carried out in an authoritative manner, respectively by a spirit leader, and are voluntarily undertaken by those to be tested. If a true capacity to marry is found, then the two lovers are united to each other in a marriage of a free form. This means that they get together in a free marriage, without there being an official regulation or joining together and without such being required. Such a form of marriage would not be good and would also be connected with many problems. For an official joining together equals an inevitable compulsion, which arises from certain official regulations, etc. This corresponds to an experience that already became owned by our ancestors, which is why the solution for many evils that arose from official marriages was sought in the free marriage, as we practice this today and work with it very well. The various ancient evils that, in official marriages, often led to very vicious assaults and even killings have been resolved since then and no longer appear, which has nothing to do with the fact that differences of opinion could not arise, but these no longer degenerate as they did in much earlier times, when rather official rules for marriages still applied. Free marriage and, thus, the Free Marriage Alliance offers many advantages. So, among other things, that the two partners do not feel chained together by an official compulsion, as this is indeed the case with an official marriage, because an official and legal obligation exists. Through this, the spouses do not feel free, as this is actually not the case with a free marriage. However, the lack of freedom creates many and very often unsolvable problems because the freedom of one's own decision and action is missing, due to the fact that the partners are bound together by an official regulation in a manner that they cannot necessarily separate from each other out of their own volition if their marriage is not in harmony and so on. Rather, this is only possible through the compliance with official regulations and a corresponding action. In a free marriage, the partners do their own free will together, according to their very own decision to decide independently on anything and everything in their marriage in an absolutely free form. This also ensures that the feeling of togetherness is extremely strong, as well as the sense of responsibility toward all aspects of the marriage bond and toward the partner. This should actually suffice as an explanation.
To be more detailed probably is not necessary. However, the question remains open. What happens then if the wise ones, etc., find that a marriage between two partners is not advisable?
The giving of advice, for those whom the tests concern in the end, is carried out jointly with the test participants, who adapt themselves into the given advice with a counselor before marriage and separate themselves in order to continue to stand together in a simple platonic friendship with each other.
And there are no problems with that?
Among the early days of the introduction of the system of free marriage, that was the case, but for more than 28,000 years, nothing like that has become known.
But now, you have not answered my first question yet, since you did not understand it. I asked about family names, respectively, surnames. Once a marriage bond is closed, what family name, respectively surname, becomes effective in the family, respectively with the wife and with the descendants? Do the wife and the children receive the surname of the husband, or does the wife keep her premarital surname? And what happens with the children?
This is regulated with us by a law, and indeed, in the way that wives and descendants resulting from the marriage bond, in each case, always bear the surname of the husband, respectively the father. This is regulated in such a manner because solely through this, confusion in the degree of kinship as well as in the family tree can be avoided. Even at very early times, our ancestors made the discovery that there were incredible confusion when female spouses retained their premarital surnames or even transferred them to their descendants. From this there arose much disaster and confusion, from which incest emerged on a massive scale.
Now, I would like to focus again on something that we already talked about once before. One of your main directives determines that you may never interfere in the spiritual development, respectively consciousness-related development, and thus also not in the cultural development of any human race, people, or humanity of any world, if these are not already capable of the right astronautics. But what happens then if you are asked for an intervention?
Even then, the same principle applies.
With that, I understand it in the case of when the persons concerned do not yet dispose of authoritative spaceflight technology.
That is not entirely true because the directive addressed by you does not just apply when there is a lack of spaceflight technology, but also when cultural developments are still at levels that are in great need of development. Included in this is also the necessary knowledge about the actual existence of human life throughout the universe. Also ingrained in the same directive is that we may not interfere in cultural scuffles if the cultural development is not highly developed enough and is not in accordance with the standards, as these are prescribed in our guidelines.
When or where, then, are you entitled to interfere?
Only where the demands of our directive are met with respect to space flight-related and cultural development, and when there are no scuffles of any kind.
Ah, I think I understand. Where the demands of your directive are fulfilled with respect to spaceflight technology as well as cultural development, you may provide or offer assistance upon request. In this case, you may answer cries for help, under the condition that you must not interfere in the existing cultural state and not in their development. With the fact that you may not interfere in scuffles. It is stipulated that you may not intervene in any wars or revolutions, and also not in any political or cultural confusion or maladministration, etc., or provide assistance. Is this right as such?
You always know how to explain the facts by which you are honored. This actually applies in such a manner, except in special emergencies that arise here and there.
Your daughter Simyase already continually threw flowers at me, my friend. But if I understand your words correctly, then you may also interfere with cosmic catastrophes, etc., not in the affairs of any humanities and planets?
That is right. There are, however, exceptions, as I said.
To what extent?
When it concerns assistance that is provided to peoples, races, and civilizations, as well as to planets that are directly connected to the alliance of our Federation.
There, it would once again interest me as to how far this Federation actually extends, because you have told me several times that you have investigated some very faraway enterprises. It would also be interesting to know whether other civilizations have the same laws and rights as those of the Pleiades.
The duties, laws, and rights are uniform throughout the entire Federation. This is one of the basic prerequisites to join our Federation. The Federation is very broad and extends to a distance of 6.2,620,000,000 light-years, where in connection with our Federation, another member Federation exists according to our model. In between the two federations, which have a sphere of influence of many millions of light-years, there are isolated systems that also belong to our federations. Indeed, there are still other civilizations that have the same or similar directives as we have, but there are also many that know no inhibitions in this respect, but rather interfere without hesitation in other cultures and wage wars, etc. In relation to this, there are quite furious space-traveling peoples.
Do you have political and diplomatic relations with such?
That is an inevitable consequence of spaceflight. In reference to this European Union, I can only give you information that is based on the statements and findings of our political scientists, whom I, nevertheless, support wholeheartedly. The idea of such a union, which should ultimately be far-reaching and include all peoples, is very ancient and was first realized by Enoch, whereby a common and planetary economic basis arose, which led to uniform balance and prosperity.
Simyase, your daughter, had reddish-colored hair for a long time. Is that usual with you? I mean that women dye their hair? Although we have talked about these things once before, we weren't detailed enough. You explained to me that women among you do this, but it didn't arise as to whether they only do this for purely medical reasons, and whether this is not actually harmful to the hair?
Female beings among us actually color their hair every now and then because a certain amount of vanity is not to be denied to them. Nevertheless, the dyeing of the hair is not just vanity-conditioned, but is always connected with a health measure. It's like this. Even though prominent diseases no longer appear among us, this doesn't mean that certain sufferings still don't come to light. However, these are of an insignificant form, like a runny nose. There are also allergies and a few other insignificant illnesses. All these illnesses are often lengthy and require prolonged treatment, like also headaches, for example. But this doesn't mean now that many medicines would be necessary for their treatment. Per symptom, only one active agent is necessary against it, which is delivered with a long-term effect. These active agents aren't ingested, injected, or administered through special requirements for deposit. Rather, they are introduced in healthy, absolutely harmless carrier substances that are mixed with equally neutral and non-health hazardous coloring means with which the hair is then dyed.
So then, you do know illnesses,
These aren't actual illnesses according to your sense, but rather trifles that occur in the course of life due to some circumstances that the persons concerned are exposed to, like when they come in contact with some things on strange new worlds that then cause the suffering. But such sufferings are, in fact, always only trifles, which also no longer appear on our world, and thus don't matter anymore.
Then your world is, so to speak, sterile?
No, the humans are immune to all diseases that once existed on our planet. They are also largely immune to diseases of other worlds. But various insignificant sufferings as well as accidents with insignificant consequences cannot be avoided every now and then when these have their origin on planets that are foreign to Era.
Then only those people who also visit foreign worlds become sick with the insignificant sufferings?
That is right. That is also the reason why we exercise great caution with respect to health.
Now I understand somewhat better. But how, for example, can one of you suddenly suffer from a headache, which seems like a migraine?
That can happen through the inhaling of an atmosphere that is very well breathable for us, but which contains weak components of toxic gas that attack certain parts of our nervous systems. As this was the case with my daughter Sim Yase, for example.
But still, you do have your devices and apparatuses that indicate to you such toxic gases, etc. Accordingly, you can then wear protective suits.
Certainly that is right, but on the one hand, our measuring instruments can only detect and indicate those materials that are known to us, in order then to analyze them. However, other substances that are unknown to us cannot be analyzed immediately if we must first explore their composition. Moreover, it can happen that certain gases, etc., only arise here and there, or in a locality, and indeed, in such a quick way that a countermeasure is hardly possible anymore. So it may just happen that every now and then such substances are inhaled, which can then produce lasting consequences, which we then just treat in the explained manner.
Aha. In foreign worlds, these surely aren't just gases that give you a hard time health-wise, right?
Of course not, because dust particles, pollen, viruses, bacilli, bacteria, plant juices, and various other things can infect us with diseases if we aren't immune to these.
Aha, so yes. Then you are not just susceptible to trifles.
As a rule, it only concerns trifles, which are then treated in the way that I explained.
And when, apart from the rule, a worse illness makes its appearance?
That would be a great exception, and such would be treated, of course, with the suitable medical means, whereby the healing process would then take no more than a few minutes or, at the most, a few hours.
And in cases of accidents with fractures, etc.?
Our medical possibilities are capable of healing a fracture in less than 6 hours, if the break does not first have to be addressed. But if this is the case, then the process takes a few hours more. Concerning diseases, our immune systems are so strengthened and protected that all diseases that are known to us cannot befall us, but only those that are unknown to us and against which we have no immunity, respectively, those whose originators are unknown to us and against which we can't even protect ourselves.
And how does it stand then with the cold? Sim Yase once complained to me that you also have to struggle with it.
It concerns an insignificant evil that befalls us, but only on the earth. However, we are still able to become masters over this.
Contact Report 249.
Can you tell me the number of alien races that are currently flying in and out of the Earth, or doing their studies here or working here in any other way?
For many years, they have always been the same, and in their number only 3.
How is that with you? I mean, in your language used with the term life form or life forms and living beings. Do you describe everything that lives, creeps, and flies as living beings or life forms?
This is indeed so.
So are bacilli, bacteria, viruses, plants, vegetables, trees and grass, etc., also called life forms?
Correct, however. What only affects applies to the flora area is not called a living being.
You mean that all that lives are termed as a life form? So all living things in the fauna as well as in the flora area, while the term living things is only valid for the fauna area, to which one must also count humans as well as life down to the microbe area, etc., while in the flora area, herbs, grass, and plants are not called living things. The question is why?
All living things in the fauna, even if they are as tiny and inconspicuous as protozoa, etc., have a form of being independent of location. This is not the case in the pure flora area, and that is not the case with any plant because it is bound to a place. Nature and life also defend themselves against an excess of humans, etc., by elementary catastrophes.
This was also the case about 6 years ago with Kohan's people, see Contact Report 60, on the planet in the Centauri area, which had 120 billion humans, and which is somewhat delayed to our time and space.
Yes, that is how it was explained to you.
Do you know the number of humans who were wiped out? And how was that humanity decimated?
Only 1.26 billion, 1,260 million humans still live there today. The population decimation took place exactly according to your statements you just made.
But why could they accumulate or give birth to so many humans before nature and life drastically intervened?
Not all humans on the planet itself were born there, but only 3.7 billion, 3.7 billion. Another 62 billion came from planets other than refugees, from 26 different worlds, which were eliminated by an interplanetary war after humans could still flee. Within a few years, the great mass of humanity on the planet in question doubled, while the epidemics and catastrophes eradicated billions of humans early on before the final great deaths began.
But there is another question that comes to my mind about the people who died on the planet in the Centauri area. How long did the whole process take? Do you know about that?
Certainly. The time of the Great Death lasted only 21 months.
Ah man, 119 billion humans, dead in only 21 months. But if nature and life strike once, then they do it thoroughly. But nevertheless. My next question. What kind of salutation do you use? Do you use titles, surnames, or first names? And what about formal and informal use of you?
Surnames are common with us, but in a different form than with terrestrial humans. But they do not carry any weight in the salutation from person to person because the salutation only takes place by first name. Otherwise, the surname is of course used, for example, for the place of residence or the registry, etc. When speaking with each other personally, however, only the first name comes into effect, whereby also the you is given. A formal you form, as it is used by terrestrial humans, is alien to us.
Thank you. How does the Pleyar number system work?
What do you mean?
Do you have the decimal system as we know it? I mean, whether you have the 0 and the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9?
That is right. Since time immemorial, we have used the system of tens as it is characteristic of all earthly advanced civilizations.
If one can speak of advanced civilizations at all, if one considers the chaos of the most diverse cultures. But tell me, how did the Earthlings come up with this number system?
Through impulse telepathic teachings from our side.
I should have guessed. In order to obtain higher values, Do you also string the numbers 1 to 9 or the 0 together?
That is the case, yes. The earthly number system goes back to our origin.
Of course, how thoughtless of me. Can you record the 10 digits in your spelling for me?
You can read them here on this device. Here, these are the digits.
3 alien races have been on Earth for several years, you said. Do they also have stations here if they are constantly present?
Only one of the 3 groups is still stationed on Earth for some time, while the other 2 groups appear only sporadically or periodically.
And new aliens? How often do they come into contact with the Earth?
That is quite different. In earlier times, it happened only twice that during a period of 100 years, more than 2 groups of non-earthly intelligences flew into the earthly space. Usually, such occurrences are only sporadic, as often as many hundreds or thousands of years pass before another alien race reaches Earth. Sometimes several thousand years pass before such an event takes place again.
Contact Report 250.
But may I ask a question about the name of what you call your system beyond our space-time continuum? Together. We always speak of the Pleiades, by which we mean only the distant and specific place from which you come. For instance, while you name your system differently in our time-shifted parallel space. Can we perhaps now speak openly about it and name the right name, which is almost identical to the Pleiades?
We have talked about this before, and I explained to you that this does not have to remain a secret, even though we might want to continue to use the name Pleiades, because that is how the name came to be.
Well then, I will now officially say that you call your star system Pleiades, but you name the system's suns and the planets equally, as we call the stars of the Pleiades in our space-time continuum.
That is correct.
On Earth, besides dinosaur traces, there are also human footprints that are millions of years old. These are both impressions that are still of normal size today, as it were, and those that are gigantic and thus originate from giants or giants, etc., and are much older in origin than the oldest traces of hominids found or their bone finds, which can only be traced back to about 4.5 million years, although Earth-born humanoids lived 9 to 12 million years ago. However, there are also ancient impressions and human footprints in small and large form next to dinosaur traces or elsewhere, which are between 65 and 140 million years old. How do you explain this when the first primeval human, hominid life forms on Earth lived at the earliest 9 to 12 million years ago? I really mean prehistoric man.
This is neither a secret nor a riddle, because all footprints of people of all sizes, from the dwarf-like beings to the giants, etc., are not traces of terrestrial human life forms. The impressions truthfully come from humans of planets, not from Saul, who visited Earth many millions of years ago, or came here to live here. Many of them also died here, whereby petrified traces, footprints, and bones can still be found in many places on Earth today, and bear witness to this fact. Earth humans only existed 9 to 12 million years ago.
Well, then the next question. Can you give me information about the facts from which your time and linear measures result?
Both result from only one factor, the light, whereby its speed and distance are fundamentally decisive, namely in a vacuum.
Prostitution, do they also exist on Era?
This degeneration has not existed in our country for a long time, but it is still prevalent to a low degree among various Federation peoples.
And what about sexually transmitted diseases?
Such diseases are no longer present in any way, not even among those Federation peoples where prostitution is still common in a limited form.
Another question regarding prostitution. Why does some of your Federation peoples still have prostitution?
There are only 3 of them, and they are still very young in our Federation. They were accepted into our Federation only a few years ago, and the efforts to abolish prostitution are running in controlled final forms, so that in less than 8 to 10 months, these peoples will also be freed from this inhumane bad habit. Since time immemorial, we have used a bat symbol as a hazard image for radioactivity.
This is interesting. Is this perhaps related to the bat symbols found in ancient Egyptian pictorial writing?
That's right. The bat symbol as a hazard image for radioactivity already existed in our early ancestors who came to Earth from the Lyra regions. The symbol thus found its way into Earth of various peoples, whereby in ancient Egyptian regions in particular, it was used as a warning sign for anything that in any form had to do with radioactivity. Note: the following comments relate to Billy Meier's time in India 1965, visiting the Buddhist monk Dharmawara Belong Mahathera at the Asoka Mission in Merauli.
Swami Dharmawara, so I know, is one of those Earth humans who had contact with 2 mysterious humans. Phobal Chung confirmed that to me again, who just appeared out of nowhere with him and disappeared again in the same way. So it was the same kind of disappearing and coming back, as if you beamed me into the ship or back to Earth. The appearance of these 2 mysterious men who visited the Swami was the same like his, therefore Asian. Can you explain something about it to me?
Officially, I can only confirm that this is true. But these are not intelligences who were located beyond Earth, if that's what you think. They were probably distant descendants of extraterrestrial humans, but they were earthbound, even if they mastered the ability of the craftless journey, which was handled by technical means. The how, what, where, and why, etc., I unfortunately cannot and must not officially explain, which is why I can only explain this to you in confidence. For us, such predictions are not of interest and not of value, because we do not live according to predictions, prophecies, and foresight, but purposefully according to the creational, natural laws and recommendations. Consequently, we would not have to fear any things of the future which could bring us harm by our own misconduct.